Well, what a massive week it's been for news. Not only knowing exactly when Phase 2 is coming now, and we've got a good idea of some of the content that's going to come along with it, but we've also had changes to Healing Priests, we've had changes to Hunters, we've had changes to Ashenvale for about the 37th time. And if you care about passing at all, like even slightly, then there's actually been some changes on Warcraft Logs that how it checks what spec or what role you're meant to be filling. Now, it's great that we've had a release date for February the 8th, if you didn't know. I'll be completely honest, that's a really long way out for me, especially when right now I'm just in the Season of Discovery Phase 2 waiting room. Some of the content coming with Phase 2 we already know about, so we know the next level upgrade is going to be Gnomeregan. We also know that the manual crowd pummeler for Feral Druids, and I say Feral Druids, obviously warriors have been able to use it, paladins, etc., but historically it's been the druid weapon. Now, you can actually look at this in-game now. It's in the game files, but obviously it's not in its final form, but you can see already they've been playing around with it, so odds are it's going to be a pretty good druid weapon, assuming it gets some feral attack power added to it, because at the moment it's got 0. But there's going to be lots of bosses in Gnomeregan, and there's some actually really weird items that come from Gnomeregan, which I'm really excited to see what they do with it. Now, I know it's extremely likely that they're just going to change the vast majority of the items in there, and they might not even reflect what their older items were, but Hydrocane is such a unique weapon that it'd be great to see this brought up to Season of Discovery levels with spell power on, for example. But having a weapon that allows underwater breathing is actually insane. So I would like to see that get some love. In the original version of the dungeon, you had Electrocutioner's Leg, which had a nature damage proc. You had Toxic Revenger, which was a great rogue weapon back in the day, dealing nature damage every 5 seconds. And it's AoE, because it actually affects anyone in an 8-yard radius around the caster. We started to see things with damage and healing on, like Acidic Walkers, which will probably just get buffed and have more spell damage on to try and bridge that gap between the melee or the physical damage dealers and the casters. And there was even a couple of really unique items, such as the shield, which was Thermoplug's central core, which when struck in combat had a 5% chance of inflicting 35 to 65 nature damage to the attacker, which was really good if you was, let's say, a prop paladin doing AoE pulls or a prop warrior doing AoE pulls. You could get lots of mobs, you're just getting free damage. But Electromagnet Gigaflux Reactivator, the cloth head, had a really unique usability, where it would channel a bolt of lightning and hurl it towards all enemies in front of the caster, causing X amount of nature damage, and then the caster surrounded by a barrier of electricity for 10 minutes. Now, it's on a 30-minute cooldown, but that's 10 minutes of a Thorns effect. So not only was there a shield where you can do reflect damage, there was this head which gave you a Thorns-like effect as well, which of course would stack with everything else. But needless to say, there's some really unique and cool items which Blizzard have got a big opportunity to build on these items and actually just make them even better than they already are. What I'm also kind of hoping is the 2 quests, so one for Horde and one for Alliance, which is Rig Wars for the Horde and the Grand Betrayal for Alliance. I'm hoping they get scaled up to a raid quality quest, because if you don't know what that is already, this is what actually grants Trip Runner Dungarees. Now, the other items that come from this quest are pretty poor, and they're not going to be something you actively go after, but being able to get a pair of legs with 18 agility, 3 strength, 6 stamina for a rogue or a feral druid or whatever you want to use it as is obviously huge. Now, if you imagine this scaled up to a raid quest where, I don't know, maybe it's got some attack power on it, or even it's made epic quality, this could be really good. Now, I'm hoping this quest does change, because this is actually one of my greatest memories of Gnomeregan, going in as soon as you could physically obtain the quest and getting these on your level 25 rogue. They were just huge. I also do see an opportunity to add extra bosses into Gnomeregan, because it's absolutely massive, and to be fair, there's not even as many bosses in it as there is in Black Fathom Deeps. Now, we also know that the PvP zone is going to be Stranglethorn Vale, which I see as both a good and a bad thing. Stranglethorn Vale is renowned for being a PvP zone. It's really the first place where there's lots of Horde and lots of Alliance in the same place, with tons of quests ranging from level 30 all the way up to 44 to 45. So you've got varying levels of people just running around killing each other. And there's some really hot zones where people will just sit there and gank all day, like Hemet Nezinwari's base camp. Now, the devs have already said this is going to be completely different to Ashenvale, so it is actually going to be more PvP and less PvE like Ashenvale is. My only concern with it is STV is one of the best places to quest, and I really hope using it as a PvP zone like Ashenvale's been used as a PvP zone don't actually take away from the PvE experience of questing in this area. Because even on a PvP server, yes, you'd have lots of PvP going on. You didn't need it to be specifically a PvP event zone. So I'm hoping people don't just skip over STV because they don't want to be constantly fighting people, like hundreds of people that are getting ready for an event that's about to pop, and they know, well, this is going to be terrible. Something floating in front of me. This is going to be a terrible experience trying to level here, so they just move on somewhere else. Now, I'm sure that concern is something that Blizzard has already thought about, but time will tell. I wasn't actually going to include this in this video, but I thought while we're talking about the release date and things that are coming, it'd be worth mentioning. There was a few runes that was added in the game files at the same time as we got the game actually launched, and we never saw them. Blizzard already came out and said things like cheat death that was data mined was never actually going to be in the game. But there are a few that actually make sense. We've got a couple for the mage, a couple for the rogue, and one for the priest. Now, the one for the priest, I've got absolutely no idea what it is, but I'll show you it at least, and you can have a little think about what you think it might be. But the first one is for the mage, and these are spell notes which you decipher using a charm, and then you learn a rune. This is in exactly the same format as all the ones that went live, and it's got an anagram. Now, very quickly solving this anagram, because it's not that difficult, is actually Missile Barrage. Missile Barrage is actually an arcane talent in Wrath of the Lich King, which gives your Arcane Blast an 8% chance, and your Arcane Barrage, Fireball, Frostbolt, and Frostfire Bolt spells a 4% chance to reduce the channel duration of your next arcane missile spells by 2.5 seconds. It reduces the mana cost by 100%, and missiles will fire every 0.5 seconds. Now, each point you put into this obviously increases the chance for it to proc. But this would be an absolutely amazing one to have in, but I think they looked at it and thought, well, actually this means you have to use Arcane Blast with it because your other spells that are attached to this, like Fireball, Frostbolt, etc., they don't heal. So all they really need to do is all arcane-based spells have a chance at proccing this if it's 40% or 20% or whatever they put it as. So things like each tick of living flame, because it does arcane damage, but it actually does spellfire damage, but that includes arcane, has a chance of proccing it. If you use arcane missiles, each arcane missile has a chance of proccing it. And of course, if you are using Arcane Blast, that's also got the chance of proccing it. I feel like this would have helped arcane mage healers out quite a lot. And if you're an arcane mage healer, let me know what you think. I would have preferred something like the ability to use arcane missiles while moving, because you probably know as well as I do, if you heal on a mage, it sucks when you have to move. But still, that was the first one. And the next one that was found was Brain Freeze. Now, Brain Freeze isn't in the files as an anagram, so this may have been part of a quest or a mob that you kill that just drops it and it doesn't actually need deciphering. You know, it's just a reward that you get from something. But this is where your frost damage spells with chilling effects have a 5% chance to cause your next fireball, or frost firebolt spells an instant cast and they cost no mana. So this is a frost talent in Wrath of the Lich King, and I actually feel like this would help Frost out, because Frost is pretty much just a solo or a PvP spec, and it's not really even a PvP spec at the moment just because of how deep you can actually get into talents. But something like this would have really helped out, and I hope we see it in the future. And I have a feeling that we probably will see something like this at level 40, and possibly Fire might see something like Hot Streak, and Arcane Mages might see something like Missile Barrage. So the fact that one of those sort of proc-based spells where it costs no mana, or makes something instant cast, or makes something cast faster, you could almost say each one of those three could almost be a cape rune, or something like that, where depending on what spec you are, depends on which one you're going to use. There was also a couple for rogues, which was Rune of Blade Rush and Rune of Trickery. If I was to hazard a guess, Rune of Trickery sounds like Tricks of the Trade, which they're probably not needed at this level bracket, and not even the next level bracket, but seeing tricks come in at something like level 60 would be amazing. But Blade Rush was an ability that was actually added in BFA, and what it actually did was it was a 45-second cooldown, it had a 20-yard range, and it would charge to your target with your blades out, dealing X amount of damage, and then it would do a smaller amount of damage to all nearby enemies as well. And while Blade Flurry is active, the damage to the non-primary targets is increased by 100%. Now, something like that to grab initial aggro as a rogue would be amazing. So if you've tanked on a rogue, you know, multi-target, a little bit lackluster, but if you could have that as your initial sort of grab of threat on surrounding targets from the primary target you're tanking, that would have been huge. That I think we should have seen at level 25 actually, but the fact that it's in the game files could suggest that it's something that's going to come maybe in the second phase. I mentioned one for priests, and it's Rune of the Banshee. Now, I've looked high and low on various different databases and looking through historic patch notes, and I don't really see anything Banshee related other than a Banshee pet. So could this have been something they were testing before Homunculi was the finished product? I don't know, but it is Rune of the Banshee. It's in the game files. Potentially, maybe something for phase 2. I don't know, but I have absolutely no idea what it is, other than it's a summonable pet, or you turn into a Banshee and you get unique spells. Now, I know a lot of people was asking for like a smite spec, so maybe this was going to be their answer to it. You go in Banshee form and you get additional holy damage or something like that. I don't know, but what I throw it out there, it exists. And the next piece of news is pretty quick. It was a couple of days ago it was put out, and it's around Ashenvale PvP. But that place has seen so many changes, I can't believe it. And the common recurring theme seems to be, let's give them as much rep as possible. Why they want everyone to be revered with Warsong Gulch before Phase 2 comes out, I don't know, but maybe there is some relevance. So with weekly restarts, the battle for Ashenvale now has a minimum and maximum time between battles. It will now never restart sooner than about 2 hours after its last start, and will not take longer than about 3 hours since its last start. So 2 to 3 hours max between each game, and at least 2 hours after the previous game. If player activity is very low or very high, the percentage progress will speed up or be slowed down to match those time constraints. And then the biggest one really is with weekly restarts, Battle for Ashenvale quest Clear the Forest and Repelling Invaders now awards 1,000 reputation, and it was 200. Now this is the quest that all of us do because we want to go and get our drums for BFD, or I don't know if you want to go in and use it in PvP. But it's where the world buff comes from. What it's really encouraging people to do is just go and tag that one mob, loot it, and then run back, wait for the battle to end, and then hand it in, which I may have been guilty of doing once or twice before a raid's about to start. A little under a week ago, they also did make a minor change to the crafted void-touched armours, so the on-use effects are now exclusive with each other and share a cooldown. Personally, it's not something that I've abused, but if you have, you can't do it anymore. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that they put a post out saying they've banned another 270,000 accounts, when I'm sure you see as many bots running around and fly hacking as I do. I'm sure they're doing the best they can, but the skeptic in me says maybe they wait till the second payment, so they ban them after about 31, 32 days when the damage has been done, but they've got paid twice. In all seriousness though, it is something that I actually want to see change because the bots are completely ruining the economy. And that video, you may have seen it recently, where there was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bots all running into a tree and then clipping under the ground, and then they go off to wherever they're going to go and farm. Is quite worrying. And the most recent news that was posted last night, which Blizzard just won't leave hunters alone. I mean, I don't care, I don't play a hunter, but it's got to be quite irritating if you do. Is looking at this, it's quite clear to see what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make pets less powerful, but make the actual hunter itself more powerful, which I kind of get, and I think that's not a bad thing. Chimera shot weapon damage is increased to 100% where it was 85%. Explosive shot base damage is increased by 25% before attack power modifiers. Mana cost of Chimera shot, explosive shot, carve, kill command, and flanking strike reduced by 50%. I mean, that's lovely. Beast Mastery Rune bonus health and damage provided to hunter pets is reduced to 20% where it was 30%, and the Beast Mastery Rune's bonus focus regeneration provided to hunter pets was reduced to 50% where it was 80%. And in the developer notes they've said, we remain concerned that hunter pets are still too powerful and believe that the best way forward is to rein in the Beast Mastery Rune while compensating via the hunter's main spells. And I think that's absolutely right. I do think other classes are catching up, even in terms of PvE and PvP. Don't get me wrong, hunters are still stupidly powerful, but I think everyone that's not casters are scaling really well with gear, and that gap is closing, so it's less of a concern now, but the pets obviously are soloing people with Eyes of the Beast and stuff like that. You know, obviously that's not right, but is a 10% damage nerf and 30% focus regen going to actually change that? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And finally, the Priest. And now the Priest, if you don't know, they are actually really powerful healers, and rightly so, they should be. But their base healing done by rune abilities has been reduced by 20%, which is actually a huge amount. Their reasoning for this is priests are outperforming other healers significantly. The adjustment will apply to Prayer Mending, Penance and Circle of Healing. And yes, whilst they are, we don't know what runes are coming down the line. Blizzard do. So the reason it's been nerfed by 20% shouldn't concern you right now. You should think, all right, okay, so some of the runes that I'm going to get in the next phase are probably going to make up for that anyway. I don't see priests now being like on the bench and we're taking resto druids or whatever, because priests are still going to be stupidly powerful, even losing that 20% healing. And I know in terms of passing, looking at healers is not really a great way to judge anything, but I've looked through the logs and you do see far more, let's say, priests and druids than you do anything else, and the vast majority of them are priests. I feel like that's kind of expected. The priest just has such a massive healing toolkit already that most classes should struggle against them, I think. And that's coming from someone whose like main is a healing mage, which I wouldn't complain about at all. Now the final one, if you like passing, is not a big deal, but Warcraft Logs have implemented a few changes. So the first one for hunters is Melee Hunter now requires more melee cast than auto shots. That's to be classed as a melee hunter. It's also worth noting that the pets melees don't contribute to this. The druids, the melee damage requirement for feral has been increased back to 20%, except on Gnomeregan, where it's still 10%. And this will be because on Gnomeregan you would be using Sunfire, most likely. The shaman, the melee damage requirement for enhancement has been increased back to 20%, again, except for on Gnomeregan, where it's still 10%. And then there was also a bug fixed with missing combatant info, which meant we didn't correctly apply Season of Discovery specific spec rules, and this mainly fixed a ton of incorrect frost mages. So it's not a big deal, but it just means it's not easy for, let's say, a melee weaving boomy whose 10% of their damage is coming from melee attacks, let's say, but the majority of it is spells, and then they're getting a 99 as feral when they're not actually feral. I mean, I've not seen that happen, but you get what I'm trying to say. And you definitely would have seen Melee Hunter right up there, and then you actually go into the logs and you have a look, and they're not really meleeing at all. They're just doing some melee weaving. And I would say that about covers the week. I've got a video coming out tomorrow, which I think you might like. So make sure you subscribe before you leave, because it's going to be having a real good look at Phase 2. It's going to be quite a big video because I'm going to be looking at all classes and what runes make sense for level 40. So it's not like, oh, quick, we want Time Warp and Bloodlust. It's like, no, obviously, we know if that was to come, it would make more sense at level 60, but what makes sense at level 40? So yeah, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Like the video, and I'll see you on the next one.